C'est pas confortable, hein?
Non, on est obligé d'être faux.
Ouais. Je vais mettre sur le côté un peu. Là, tac, quoi.
It's open now.
I think you...
He wants to start with me, then you, then you. Okay. That's all right?
Okay, all right.
Starting with you, but he prefers me. So.
Okay, okay. Evet, öyle olduğu zaman hiç güzel olmuyor. Nasıl olur?
What's your name? Sarah, okay.
Evet, ona.
You have a handheld mic. Yep, okay. Okay, welcome everybody.
Cümlemi sağlamak çok zor oluyor.
Hear me all right?
Bu şekilde konsantre olamıyorum ama.
Tamam, o zaman daha şey yapalım, hani blok blok.
Thanks for coming. My name is Steve Coll. I'm the dean here at the Graduate School of Journalism, and I'm very pleased that we could organize this event to discuss this very important unresolved murder case of a journalist who was a professional friend of mine, someone who I admired enormously, and whose loss I still feel. And I want to turn now to the panel. Immediately to my left is Agnès Callamard, who is an international human rights expert. She's the director of Columbia University's Global Freedom of Expression program, and she is serving as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary executions. Previously, she led the free expression organization Article 19, founded the Humanitarian Accountability Partnership, and was the chef de cabinet for the Secretary General of Amnesty International. She undertook a large-scale human rights inquiry into the murder of Jamal Khashoggi and presented her report to the UN Human Rights Council last June. And so we'll hear a little bit more about that from her. To Agnès' left is Lina al-Hathloul. She is a Saudi activist known for her relentless advocacy to free her sister, Loujain al-Hathloul. Loujain, who was only 29 at the time, was arrested and detained in 2018. They charged her for protests against the ban on women driving in the kingdom. And since her arrest, the Saudi government has lifted the ban, but activists like Loujain remain imprisoned under very difficult circumstances. And Lina and her brother Walid continue to bring light to not only her detention and the circumstances and conditions of her detention, but those of other prisoners of conscience who are held in Saudi Arabia. And then to her left is Hatice Cengiz, who was the fiancée of Jamal Khashoggi. And she is a doctoral student and a writer. And after his murder, she began campaigning for the international community to hold the Saudi authorities responsible for his assassination. Agnès, I'd like to start with you because I'm not sure everyone here is familiar with the extraordinary scope of your investigation. So tell us about how you carried it out. but also what's happened since it was presented and published at the UN.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here in the company of those two formidable women. In January of this year, I undertook an investigation into the killing of Jamal Khashoggi in response to what I perceived to be the inaction of the United Nations and the seemingly inability of the UN to play a meaningful role in what was becoming an international crisis. And it felt to me that for a situation such as that one, we need the UN to be able to have something meaningful to say and to do. The investigation lasted, well, it's still possibly ongoing, but with two of my colleagues that are here, who I want to name, Bak Avesjanov and Caroline Horn. The three of us were basically the team that undertook the investigation into that execution. We went in 7, 8 different countries, spent a lot of time in Turkey, and out of more than 100 interviews, a review of public documents, the review of the international law, which was pretty complex, in fact, because of the location of the killings, the fact that it was an extraterritorial targeted killings, and for many other reasons, we did spend also quite a lot of time unpacking the legal dimension of what was happening. From that investigation, I issued a report that was made public mid-June at the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and very quickly, the key findings were that Mr. Khashoggi had been the victim of a premeditated, planned, organized execution, that this was an extrajudicial execution to the extent that the state of Saudi Arabia was responsible for it, not rogue elements as they tried to pretend, that the killing of Mr. Khashoggi was of course a violation of his right to life, but was also a violation of a central convention within the UN system, the Convention Against Enforced Disappearance, the Convention Against Torture, and the UN Charter that prohibits the use of force in times of peace. In addition, the killing was also a violation of a central tenet of the international normative framework, which is freedom of expression. The multiple violations were made further worse by the fact that Saudi Arabia, according to my findings, failed to undertake an investigation that was impartial and in good faith. And the evidence as I collected demonstrated that, in fact, the investigation aimed at covering up the crime scene literally and figuratively. In addition to that, it also led to a very quick prosecution that failed to name those that were, that failed to charge those that have been associated with the commissioning of the killing, including someone who actually was mentioned by the Saudi prosecutor, namely Saud al-Qahtani. To this date, the state of Saudi Arabia has refused to acknowledge responsibilities for the killing as a state. It is persisting in defining the crime as a domestic issue and is failing to acknowledge the numerous victims associated with the killing, including Hatice, who is present here.
So, I mean, it's an extraordinarily strong report, and I think an example of why the function of the Special Rapporteur at the UN is a meaningful one, because there was a lot of journalism, there was a lot of credible reporting from Turkey about what the evidence showed, but pulling it all together and setting it in the context of international law, I think, was a real advance in this case. So congratulations to you and your team. What is happening with the purported trials in Saudi Arabia, to your understanding? It's all very vague. So far as I'm aware, there hasn't been any international kind of independent witnessing of what's going on. There's a lot of claims that people are being held under house arrest. But what do you know? What do we know and not know about those trials?
Well, what do we know is that 11 people are on trial on various charges, that 5 of them are facing death penalty. We know that the trial is held behind closed doors. We know that one of the person who has been named for inciting the killing team has not been charged, meaning Saud al-Qahtani. We know that the proceedings, in my view, because they were so quick, are almost amounting to a summary proceedings, which is a warning against us all when we are calling for a quick justice. We need to be aware of what in practice this may mean. We also know that Saudi Arabia has been quite smart in that it has supposedly opened the trial to international observers. In that case, the 5 members of the Security Council plus Turkey, but that those observers have signed an agreement of confidentiality, so there is absolutely nothing that they have released in the public at the moment. By so doing, in my opinion, they are making, Saudi Arabia is making those countries who are doing so willingly complicit in what is nothing but a miscarriage of justice. Of course, I got information about what is being said during the trial. They are quite important information that is being made through the trials, but in the absence of opening the trial to the public, in the absence of allowing independent international observers to report on the proceedings, we cannot take the leaks regarding the trial or the little information that comes in and out as at face value. And this is why in my report I have questioned repeatedly the proceedings and I have called for the trial to be open to the public.
Thank you. Hatice, and thank you, Sarah, for interpreting. Just do that at whatever pace you find useful. You've been campaigning for justice since Jamal disappeared. We all recognize that the United States has declined to put meaningful pressure on Saudi Arabia in the context of the Trump administration's very close relationship with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. As you travel elsewhere in Europe or in Asia, have you encountered through your campaigning any governments or institutions that have been willing to bear any economic cost or any financial cost for speaking out against this injustice, speaking out about this case? Or is all of the industrialized world, all of Saudi Arabia's customers, more or less passive? Who has given you, any inspiration by their willingness to pay a price to pressure Saudi Arabia around this case?
Baskı uygulama konusunda hangi ülkeler mesela isteklilerle ancak bedel ödeme karşılığında bile olsa?
Evet. Teşekkür ediyorum buradaki bütün arkadaşlara, öğrencilere, katılanlara. Hala benim için çok farklı bir pozisyon. Şu anda içinde bulunduğum pozisyon tam olarak Jamal gibi birisinin adına konuşmak ya da Jamal gibi birisinin çok yakınlığı olarak onunla ilgili konuşmak çok zor bir şey aslında. Çünkü kendisinin hayatıyla inşa ettiği bir geçmişi vardı ve onun için çok önemli ve değerliydi. Benim için de çok önemli ve değerli tabii. Şimdi onun olmadığı bir yerde onun hakkında konuşmak ya da onun mücadelesinde bulunmak benim için hala daha inanamadığım, şu vakit itibariyle hala inanamadığım bir şey.
Buraya kadar söyleyeyim.
Thank you very much for your question, and welcome, distinguished friends and colleagues. And actually, it's very still difficult for me to speak on behalf of Jamal, because Jamal was such a special person with, very diverse features. So.
Ben bu geçtiğimiz bir yıllık süre içerisinde sizin bahsettiğiniz gibi bana bu kampanyayı, siz buna kampanya diyorsunuz ama ben bunu tam olarak kampanya olarak değerlendirmiyorum. Çünkü bu benim aslında yapmam gereken şey. Çünkü hayatımda en yakında olmasını istediğim kişi öldürüldü. Yani bu ve çok olağanüstü bir şekilde öldürüldü. Bunun tabii ki mücadelesini vermek durumundaydım. Bu Jamal olduğu için, uluslararası global bir isim olduğu için basın önünde oluyor. Aradaki fark bu. Eğer normal birisi olsaydı da bu mücadeleyi vermek zorundaydım. Çünkü normal olmayan bir şekilde birisi sizin hayatınızdan alınıyor.
Yes, for almost a year, I've been seeking justice for Jamal. So you call it a campaign, but I don't call it a campaign actually, because I perceive this as a duty that I owe to Jamal, my beloved one. So he was the person that I loved most in my life. So, and unfortunately, he was brutally killed since he was, internationally recognized journalist. So he's a well-known figure. So that's why all my, efforts took place before, international press, and it's covered a lot. But even Jamal was a very ordinary person. I will definitely continue to seek justice for him. That's why you all get to know my efforts for Jamal.
Bu geçtiğimiz bir yıllık süre içerisinde yani Avrupa'da 3-4 tane ülke, Amerika'ya işte 2 kere ziyaret ettik. Bu süreçte yani olumlu ya da olumsuz anlamda Suudi Arabistan lehine ya da Suudi Arabistan aleyhine bir aksiyonda bulunmamı ya da eğilimimizin daha böyle sert ve olumsuz olması yönünde bir herhangi bir ülkeden bir baskı gelmedi ya da bir teklif gelmedi. Bu olumlu mu bilmiyorum ama çok enteresan. Aynı zamanda Suudi Arabistan'ın bu gerçekleştirmiş olduğu cinayete yönelik ülkelerden çok açık destek de gelmedi. Özellikle Avrupa ülkelerinden, Amerika'dan da dahil.
So in a year, I visited 3 or 4 European countries, and I visited the United States of America twice as part of my efforts to seek justice for Jamal. So I can say that none of these authorities or countries asked me to take a positive or negative attitude towards Saudi Arabia. They never exerted pressure on me, but they never, actually said anything against Saudi Arabia. They didn't show any reaction to Saudi Arabia.
Siz sorunuzun başında anlamlı bir duruş göstermediğinden bahsettiniz Amerika'nın. Bence Amerika'nın hiçbir şekilde duruşu olmadı, anlamlı bir duruş değil, hiçbir şekilde bir duruşu olmadı. Yalnız kongre üyeleri ve bazı senatörlerin ne kadar mevcut siyasi duruştan ötürü mahcup olduklarını gördüm benimle konuşmalarında. Ve Amerika'da bazı kararların yavaş geldiğini, bazı sonuçların daha yavaş geldiğini, her şeyin başkandan ibaret olmadığını söyleyen çok hararetli ve heyecanlı bir ses de vardı. Bunu da gördüm. Beni davet ettikleri zaman kongrede, hearing konuşmalarında. Ama onun dışında böyle açık ve net olarak bir Avrupa ülkesinden böyle bir destek, işte senin yanındayız, böyle bir yazılı ya da sözlü şifahi bir destek gelmedi. Zaten Türkiye'nin pozisyonunu biliyorsunuz. Ortaya çıkartmak için mevcut katliamı elinden geleni yaptı. Türkiye hükümeti de yapabildiğini yaptı aslında. Bundan daha fazlası sizin görmediğiniz, benim bildiğim bir şey yok. Çok enteresan, herkesin bu kadar sevdiği ve hem değerleri hem ismi noktasında gönül birliğine vardığı isim hakkında yani siyasi olarak hiçbir şekilde ciddi bir adımın atılmaması çok büyük bir hayal kırıklığı oluşturdu bende.
So I can say that the United States of America and its administration never had a clear attitude about Jamal's killing. So, but when I was invited to attend a hearing at the Capitol Hill, actually, and I heard American congressmen saying, the USA isn't all about the president, and they were feeling really bad and shy about this attitude of the Trump administration towards Jamal's killing. So, but on the other hand, I can say I received no formal or informal support from any European Union member states. Speaking of the Republic of Turkey, Turkey did its best in investigating as much as international law allowed it to do so. But I can say that at the end of 1 year, I'm highly disappointed about this process.
Thank you very much. Lina, can you just share with the audience the essential story of your sister's arrest and detention, exactly how it occurred, and how long she's been detained, and what you understand about her conditions, and then we'll go from there. But just make sure everyone understands what happened to her.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm the sister of Loujain al-Hathloul. Loujain al-Hathloul is a Saudi activist. She was one of the leaders trying to lift the ban on women, the ban made on women to drive. So the first time she was really popular on social media, and the first time she tried to drive was in 2014. She was in the Emirates and she was trying to cross the border between the Emirates and Saudi Arabia. She got imprisoned the first time for 73 days. When she got out, she didn't stop her activism, and it even got broader than this, and she really thought about it and understood that the problem is the whole male guardianship system in Saudi Arabia. So she even started to fight against this. And she was also trying to open a shelter for women victims of domestic violence. And so for all these years, she was harassed. She got imprisoned another time in 2017. We don't know the reasons. They just released her after a couple of days. And she never stopped her activism, actually. And in March 2018, she was in the streets of the Emirates, and she got kidnapped on the road, brought back to Saudi Arabia, and since then she was banned to travel, so she couldn't leave the country. In May 2018, they arrested her at our house without giving us any reason, without a warrant, without anything. For a couple of days, we didn't know where she was. We didn't have any information about her. We didn't understand anything, because from March till May, they forced her to remain silent, and she did. She stopped social media, she stopped talking. And so we really didn't understand what was happening, especially that a month later, the ban on women was to be lifted. So it was very weird for us to live this. And so for a couple of months, my parents weren't allowed to see her, but she could call a few times, and she would say that she was in a private place or a hotel and in August, that was the first visit, and my parents saw that she was really, she wasn't healthy. She was shaking, she had bruises all over her body, she had red marks, so it was obvious that she was being tortured. But she didn't say that she was, because I think with all the pressure, you can't really admit it. In November, during the visit of November, my parents really forced her, because there was leaks of reports of Saudi prisons saying that they know that there are some tortures in Saudi prisons. And so they forced her to say it, and she admitted it and told my parents the truth. She said that Saud al-Qahtani was supervising the torture. And after that, because during this period, we thought that silence was the right thing to do. Maybe it would help her. We really thought that remaining silent would help her. And then when we found out about the torture, we said, it's enough. We have to speak up and talk about it. And once we talked about it, her conditions were a lot better in prison. They started the trial in March 2019. And so in March 2019, we found out about the charges. So basically, she was in prison for 10 months without any official charges. All we knew was what the media was saying. The media was saying that she was a traitor, a foreign agent. Yeah. And so when we got the charges, all the charges were really her activism. So being in contact with foreign journalists, being in contact with international organizations, applying for a job at the UN. So it really has nothing to do with what the media was saying at that time. And so there was 4 sessions of the trial. The fourth one got canceled. We don't know why. We don't know when the next session will be. And so now it's been 4 months that she's waiting for a new date of the trial, and we have no news about the trial. Since the other women have been released, which is in April, she's in a solitary confinement. So she's in solitary confinement. She doesn't know when this will end, and so we basically don't have any news about anything, and it's just waiting endlessly. Yeah.
So once you and your family decided to speak out about the conditions in which she was being held, you joined this new world of Saudi descent in exile, which reflects the changing conditions inside the kingdom in some ways. You have a regime now that is actively harassing and attacking dissent outside of the kingdom's borders, kidnapping people. Your sister's not the only case where that's happened. What has been your experience of being in exile and in dissent? Have you found yourself under pressure? Have you connected with other Saudi dissidents who are trying to organize a vocal response to the kingdom?
It's very personal. I'm not in exile. I left Saudi a lot, 7 years ago. So, my fight is my sister. So maybe she was an activist trying to change things, reform Saudi Arabia, etc. I'm really not in this political sphere. I'm really fighting to get justice for my sister. And to be honest, at the very beginning, I was even scared to talk to people who had the same story as mine. I thought that I would be labeled as a dissident, as you're saying, but I'm not actually. I'm really not. I'm just seeking justice, and I want Saudi Arabia to have more channels of, engaging with the civil society. I'm not trying to reform everything or to change everything. I just want things to change and to give the civil society more freedom. And so now, yes, for example, with Khadija, with Abdullah, we have been, we have the same story. The people that have killed Khashoggi are the same ones that have been torturing my sister. So it's really just a little group in Saudi Arabia that has been taking all of this and abusing of their power. And I think it's something that we should stop now. Yeah.
So Agnès, what did you learn during your investigation and its aftermath about what is effective to change the conduct of this regime, so heavily influenced, we think, by the Crown Prince's approach to the exercise of power? Saudi Arabia could be a harsh place for certain kinds of dissent for decades, but it has seemed to evolve over the last few years from a softer authoritarian state into a harder police state. And so what do you see as effective from an international perspective?
Well, let me maybe first highlight the challenges. Saudi Arabia has become or is a key ally for many of the countries that had traditionally been those speaking up for human rights. I'm thinking here of course, this country, the United States, as well as Europe. It is seen by the governments of those countries as a key geostrategic, economic, and financial ally. the oil is playing a big role, but more generally the financial might of Saudi Arabia is infiltrating many aspects of our economic life. I mean, this is a country that has the potential to basically buy its way into many corners, economic, cultural, religious, it's everywhere through its financial power. It is also perceived right now as the only country through which, at least for some actors, the other regional power, Iran, can be targeted. So the geostrategic environment in the region are really working very much against anything we're trying to do, which is making what's happening in Capitol Hill all the more remarkable. Of all the countries that I have visited, of all the people I have met, Capitol Hill has been, and by this I mean the House and the Senate, have been the only political institutions in the world that have taken accountability for Jamal, for the women's rights activist to heart, and have put their actions where their mouth was. Oh, sorry if it's not the right expression, yes. But you know what I mean. Yes, we had originally Canada played a key role. Canada was heavily wounded by their decision to speak on behalf of...
That's a good example of someone who was willing to pay a price.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They spoke up. They were left alone. Not one single country came to the assistance of Canada when Canada dared confronting the ridiculous attacks against women's rights activists and the heartless and cruel attacks against women's rights activists. Canada was left hanging by itself, and still to this day is licking its wounds from it. We had Germany, the German public very angry, called on their government to take actions, embargo on weapons, and a few other things. By January, February 2019, probably not very publicly, but under pressure from the United Nations, from the EU member states, that embargo was progressively weakened. And even though at least Angela Merkel has made some important public statements, I am quite convinced that the politics and the policies are very much in sync with what other European governments have done, which is nothing, at least as far as accountability is concerned. And we all know where the president of this country stands. So let me again repeat that right now, bipartisan actions in the US House and Senate, to me, are remarkable. They are remarkable. I was at a meeting yesterday, at a public meeting, where 11 congressmen and senators spoke. They spoke in the most strongest terms on the lack of accountability that they are witnessing right now around the world. They committed to keep at it, to keep demanding. There is the Malinowski Act, if some of you knows, was adopted by the US House by a very large majority. Only 8 people voted against it. It is now that act which will force the head of the intelligence to reveal a range of other things and will impose sanctions. That act is now under discussions. Well, it's a complex process, but it's still ongoing. I was told yesterday of other initiatives by other senators and congressmen to hold Saudi Arabia to account. I want to welcome, celebrate, thank those in the Congress and the Senate who are ensuring that accountability for all those crimes remain a reality. And my hope is that if one of those actions does make it above the hurdle of the US president veto, my hope is that it will unparalyze other political institutions around the world.
So just a quick follow-up. I see our Colombia colleague David Stone here. He probably had something to do with the article that the president of Colombia, Lee Bollinger, published in the Washington Post, arguing for the possibility of the FBI and the US seeking accountability through the criminal justice system. It's been an interesting week in Washington. The possibilities for political change, kind of stimulating to think about. But even if we had to wait for an election and there were a different administration with a different policy toward the region, are there pathways other than the kinds of sanctions and pressures that Congress might enact that you think are realistic in this case?
Well, realistic, I don't know, but they've got to be explored anyway, because this is how system evolve, okay? So what do we have? We can have civil suit in the US, and that's something that cannot be rejected, even though it is a difficult pathway. Second, the US was hit by the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. There is a link between the US and the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, which in legal terms should open the possibility of investigation, particularly on the part of the FBI. Thirdly, we have all the actions undertaken by the First Amendment Center, the Knight Amendment Center in the back over there. Jamil can speak about it, and Open Society through the Freedom of Information Act, which is to force the declassification of materials in the hands of the CIA or other actors, so that we have the full evidence that we need regarding the identity of those who have ordered the crime. So all of those options are on the table. They must be explored. They must be pushed to their full extent, if only to create example, if only to create fears in Saudi Arabia and beyond. Because let's not forget that if people ever believe that you can get away with murder in that fashion, that is sending the completely wrong message to our world, which is already so intolerant for dissenting voices. So we need all of those actions to keep happening, to make it clear to the rest of the world, don't do it, because there will be consequences.
So we'll ask Jamil in a minute to tell us a little bit about what he's up to in the way that you described. But before we turn to the audience, Hatice, I wanted to go back to you and talk about Jamal himself and his writings, because that is, from a journalist's perspective, someplace close to the heart of the matter. When he came to the United States and began writing for the Washington Post about what he saw happening in Saudi Arabia, I think you tell me, but I think he saw himself still as kind of loyal opposition. As Lina was saying, he wasn't calling for an absolute revolution. He just felt that this government was misguided increasingly, and that it was departing from the kind of path to political openness and to social change that was possible even within the kingdom as it was organized under the royal family. But let me stop. You talk to us about what you saw in Jamal's writings, what he was trying to communicate during the time that he was in the United States and leading up to his murder.
Evet, tam da bu benim Cemal'e ilk tanıştığımız zaman sorduğum soruya benzeyen bir soru. Ben 2018 Mayıs ayında Cemal'le bir konferansta tanıştığımız zaman şöyle bir soru yöneltmiştim kendisine. Demiştim ki sizin ülkenizde daha önce de bireysel ifadeler çok fazla dünya gündeminde olan bir şey değildi. Yani ifade hürriyeti, demokrasi ve benzeri insan hakları gibi değerler ya da kavramlar. Şimdi bir şeyler mi değişti? Daha ne değişmiş olabilir? Neden ülkenizden ayrıldınız? Ülkenizden ayrılarak daha fazla mı ülkenize hizmet ediyorsunuz? Yazılarınızı takip ediyorum. Son zamanlarda söylediğiniz şeyler ülkenizde bir şeylerin çok anormal yönde ilerlediğine yönelik yazılar. Bunu nasıl değerlendiriyorsunuz diye sorduğum zaman bana Suudi Arabistan'ın tarihinde görülmemiş bir değişim ve dönüşümden geçtiğini ve bu süreci çok tehlikeli bir şekilde yaşadığını ve kontrol edilemez bir boyuta geldiğini ve artık kendisinin bir tecrübe sahibi bir gazeteci olarak mevcut durumu artık kaldıramadığını, ülkesinde o şekilde, o bilinçte ve o yaşta o tecrübeleri sahip birisi olarak yaşamaya devam edemediğini ve bunun ona ağır geldiği için ülkesinden ayrıldığını ve yazılarını da bu yüzden daha hararetli yazdığını söylemişti.
Sarah?
So when I met, sorry, excuse me.
When I first met Jamal at a conference in May 2018, I actually asked the very same question to him. So I told him, like, you keep covering principles such as freedom of expression, human rights, fundamental, freedoms, and you want them to flourish further in Saudi Arabia. So what is the reason? So is that the reason why you left your country to write these things more, And what he told me in response was, what he was saying, Saudi Arabia was undergoing an unusual transformation, and the process was uncontrollable. And then he couldn't tolerate seeing his country governed like that, because Jamal was a highly experienced journalist, and at that age, he couldn't, tolerate seeing his country, in this position.
Bu nedenden dolayı yazılarını ben söylemek istediğinden daha fazlası vardı aslında içinde. Yazılarında ifade ettiğinden daha fazlası vardı içinde. Ve hep bizim özel konuşmalarımızda da bunlara değiniyorduk. Onun aslında yazılarında söylemek istediği şey, Orta Doğu'nun genelinde yaşanan bir değişim, dönüşüm var. Suudi Arabistan bunu görmezden geliyor. Bunu görmezden gelmemiş olsa ben şu anda burada olmazdım. İşte bu süreçte benim gibi insanların varlığına Suudi Arabistan içinde ihtiyacımız var, dışında değil. Bunun altını çizmeye çalışıyordu. Yani Orta Doğu'da Arap Baharı ile beraber gelen o 2011'de başlayan süreci Suudi Arabistan'ın yanlış değerlendirdiğinden bahsediyordu ve bu sürecin dışında kalmak istediği için uğraştığından bahsediyordu. Dolayısıyla bu süreçten ayrı bir Suudi Arabistan düşünülemeyecek ve bu sürece bir şekilde kendisini angaje etmesi gerekiyor. Ve bu sürece bağlanması gerekiyor. Nihayetinde zaten onun söylediği gerçekten çok ileriye dönük fikirlerinin isabetli olduğunu her geçen gün daha iyi anlıyorum. Süreç zaten kendisini artık geri çeviremiyor. Görüyoruz mesela Mısır'da aynı şeyler tekrarlanıyor. Cezayir'de, Sudan'da, yani tam olarak Suudi Arabistan'ın yapmaya çalıştığı şey süreci geciktirmeye çalışmak, işte o eski statükoyu devam ettirmeye çalışmak ama her şey çok değişti diyordu Cemal. Bu bir fırsat ve Suudi Arabistan bu fırsatı değerlendirmeli diyordu. Tek çabası buydu ve benim için de çok değerliydi gerçekten.
Actually, Jamal wanted to say more, so when I had discussions with him, we were discussing all the details. And according to Jamal, Saudi Arabia was turning a blind eye on all these changes taking place in the Middle East in a general framework, especially 2011 onwards, the Arab Spring movement, and Saudi Arabia was actually misinterpreting this movement taking place in all the regional countries. And Jamal thought that Saudi Arabia shouldn't have distanced itself from this movement, but rather should have been much more engaged into this wave of changes. And now I much more appreciate the comments made by Jamal about this. And again, today we see all these incidences taking place in Egypt, Algeria, and Sudan. And Jamal thought that Saudi Arabia was only trying to distance itself from these changes and also trying to maintain the status quo instead of going for a series of reforms to keep up with the recent developments in the region.
Thank you. So we got about 25 or 30 minutes left. I'd like to open it up to the audience. If I could impose upon you, Jamil, if this is something you feel you can talk about in a public forum, I'd love to know what you're thinking about with your FOIA work.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I mean, I think in the context of everything that you're discussing, the work we've been doing is really, really just a footnote to all of this. But we were interested in this question of, the Knight Institute, we're interested in this question of responsibility for this crime. Our mandate is basically a domestic mandate. We're focused on free speech inside the United States and the First Amendment. But we thought that one important angle here had to do with the possible complicity of the U.S. government, or at least the possible responsibility at some level of the U.S. government for Khashoggi's disappearance and killing. And we became interested in that because the Washington Post reported that the U.S. government had picked up certain communications through signals intelligence in the weeks and months before the killing. And we wondered whether somebody in the U.S. government might have known that Khashoggi was under a threat to his life or liberty before the threat was actually, before the killing actually took place. And there is an obligation on the part of U.S. intelligence agencies to warn people if they come across evidence in the course of surveillance, evidence that a particular person is subject to a threat to life or liberty. There is a legal obligation to inform the person of the threat. And so we wondered, how much information did the U.S. government have in advance of the killing? And if they did have information, who had the information and what was done with that information? So we filed a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. We were working with the Committee to Protect Journalists. And we asked for the duty to warn policies, and we also asked for any information relating to the duty to warn as applied to Jamal Khashoggi. And through that litigation, we were able to get quite a bit of information about the policies themselves. Under what circumstances do the intelligence agencies in the United States inform surveillance targets of threats to their life or liberty? And we have posted all of that information publicly, and my colleague here, Larry Seams, has written a truly great piece about those policies. It's up on Just Security, which is a national security blog. But when it came to information about Khashoggi himself, the agencies invoked what's called a GLOMAR response, saying that they couldn't confirm or deny that they had any information about Khashoggi. And for a variety of mostly uninteresting reasons, we are not challenging that GLOMAR response, but the Committee to Protect Journalists is, and in fact they just filed a brief a couple days ago, the first brief in the appeals court challenging the GLOMAR response, and we are hopeful that they'll be successful in getting the court to order the government to provide more information than it has.
Oh, it's fascinating. All right, let's open it up to the audience for questions to any of our panelists. David?
Thank you for that, Steve, although I think my role maybe would have been, here's Fred's email. So, for the whole panel, first of all, thank you for being here. And Agnès, we're so proud of your work on this. Some of you may have seen that our tall, talented friend Marty Smith of Frontline, who has a film coming out this week, actually managed to get some on-the-record comment at a racetrack from Prince, where he is quoted as saying, "It happened under my watch," of the Khashoggi murder. I get all the responsibility because it happened under my watch, but he claimed it was without his knowledge, and went on to say, "We have 20 million people, we have 3 million government employees," to which Marty says, "and they can take one of your planes," referring to the 15-member hit team. And the prince's response was, I have officials, ministers to follow things, and they're responsible. They have the authority to do that. What are people's thoughts?
Right, so, and Agnès, what do you think? Tell us what the,
Can we ask Hatice?
yeah, but let me ask you as well, what, there's a sort of, the standard journalistic treatment of MBS's personal culpability for the murder cites, the estimates of U.S. intelligence agencies that they have high confidence that MBS directed the killing. And of course, the circumstantial evidence would support such a guesstimate. But is there still, basically from a courtroom perspective, a gap in evidence about his personal responsibility?
Sure. So I let Hatice interpret because I think she has an excellent interpretation of what MBS has said. Look, under international criminal law or under comparative criminal law, the responsibilities within the chain of command can take various forms. It is about ordering at one extreme, all the way to criminal negligence, failure to protect or failure to prevent even. And in between there are incitement and a range of other action that could lead to criminal liability. There is, according to my findings, no doubt that the Crown Prince bears responsibility in relation to the killing. What I could not determine with the level of evidence required for my report, I could not determine whether his responsibility was in terms of ordering or whether it was in his, that he failed to take actions when he should have taken actions under the failure to protect legal framework. I am fully aware of the CIA leaks, and I am far more aware and far more confident in the way the intelligence committee, I believe, that was briefed by the CIA has reported back on what they were told. And in fact, yesterday at this meeting, those that had been briefed reiterated the notion that MBS had ordered the killing, according to the information they had received from the CIA. That information has no legal weight. It goes nowhere in a court at the moment. And of course, I cannot make it part of my report because of the standard of evidence I have used. So that's where I am. That's why I have asked for the declassification of the CIA briefing. That's why I'm also continuing to ask Turkey to proceed with its public inquest, as they may have more information that they have not revealed so far. And the notion that MBS somehow recognizes responsibilities, I think we need to be careful not to make too much out of it. I mean, what he's saying is, I am more or less the quasi-head of state, therefore, yes, I have power and influence and responsibilities. He does not acknowledge his personal liability for the killing. All he's saying is, I am almost the king. So yes, it happens under my watch as a king. Big news, frankly. But I think I would love Hatice to say what how she interprets it.
Ben bu açıklama birazcık sanki içinde bulunduğumuz bu günlerde bizatihi zamanlama olarak çok manalı bir zamanda geldiğini düşünüyorum. Yani 2 Ekim öncesi Prens'in medyadan gelecek bu büyük baskı sürecini hafifletmek adına kendisi, çünkü bütün dünya tarafından bir cevapla karşı karşıya bırakıldı ya da birçok insan soru sordu ve ilk defa bu konuyla alakalı bir cevap veriyor ve böyle bir cevap vererek o kendisi üzerindeki baskıyı bence azaltmaya çalıştı. Bu bir bence siyasi taktik.
So the timing of the statement by the Crown Prince is quite interesting, because right before the anniversary of Jamal's killing, that is October the 2nd, I think in order to ease the pressure exerted by international media, he employed this political tactic.
Çünkü 2 Ekim itibariyle tekrardan bütün dünyadan çok ciddi bir baskı gelecek. O da zaten halihazırda cevaplamış oldu böyle bir karışık ifadeleri barındıran bir demeçle. Ben spesifik olarak bu ifadenin altında Sayın Callamard'ın da dediği gibi kendisini birazcık daha mevcut pozisyondan yukarıya çıkartma çabası, yani ülkenin aslında gerçek yöneticisinin kendisi olduğuna dair böyle bir imajı çizmeye çalıştığına dair bir yorum çıkardım. Ayrıca sorumluluğun kendisinin ismi altında ya da kendisinin varlığı altında olmasıyla kendisini üste çıkarıp sorumluluğu başkasına itme. Yani kendisini üste çıkartırken, kendisini kral gibi göstermeye çalışırken ülkede sanki başka birileri bu olaydan sorumluymuş gibi olaydan kendisini uzaklaştırma. Yani sorumluluğu alarak sorumluluktan kaçma gibi bir taktik ben yorumladım. Ben dün de bunu ifade ettim konuşmamızda. Eğer kendisinin sorumluluğu altında tamamen gerçekleştiyse o zaman bütün soruların yanıtlarını kendisinden alabiliriz. Jamal neden öldürüldü? Öldürme emrini kim verdi? Ceset nerede? Bu gibi soruların cevabını da o zaman kamuoyuyla paylaşması gerekiyor.
So he has been already exposed to huge pressure due to massive media coverage. And I think the Crown Prince is eager to draw an image about himself like he's the highest in the Saudi administration and he's at the top level, and making look himself like he is the actual king. And by doing so, he's distancing himself from Jamal's killing by actually pretending like he is the one who has the responsibility, kind of he's distancing himself from the involvement. So if now that he says everything happened under his watch, then I have simple questions to him. Why was Jamal killed? Who ordered his killing? And please share the details with us, if so.
Lina, before we take another question, I just want to bring you back in the conversation. You can say anything about this that interests you, but I also wanted to ask, in reference to something Agnès said earlier, she said that the Congress of the United States may be the strongest political institution in the world in responding to Jamal's case. Have you also found that the Congress of the United States has been interested in your sister's case and in your testimony about it?
Can I just come back to the previous question? Yeah. Just aside of MBS's responsibility, I just want to add also that the people that have been accused of this crime, we don't know where the trial is, if these people are actually facing a trial. And I also want to add that when my sister and the others got arrested, their names were published in the newspaper. And now that we want the names of the ones that are accused of this crime, they say that Saudi law forbids names to be published. So either they are above the law or they have violated my sister's rights. And that's it.
Okay.
What about the US Congress?
The US Congress. Yes, I think as we saw yesterday, some of them are really eager to seek justice. But I always say, as long as my sister is still in jail, as long as Jamal doesn't have justice, as long as there are so many political prisoners in Saudi jails, it's not enough. It's not enough as long as justice is not made. But yes, I thank them for that. Yeah.
Great. Who else has a question? First there, and then we'll come over here. Thanks.
Hi, thank you for coming here, and my condolences. you were saying that Canada is still licking its wounds, and I know some of the mechanisms that Saudi Arabia uses to kind of punish people that speak out against them, but I was hoping that you could talk more about what they do, and if you think that if it didn't have the resources and the cultural political power that it did, how do you think that other countries would react to the extrajudicial killings and the human rights violations? And to also the panel in general, sorry, it's two questions, is do you think King bin Salman how do you think his image has changed since the Khashoggi murder? And does he remain as popular as people depict him to be, or do you think that that's also changing as well since 2011?
Shall we proceed, or do we take
yes,
the
why don't you
questions?
take the Canada
Yeah.
part first,
Yeah,
and then we'll
I won't
ask
take
the
the
rest
other
about,
one, yeah.
about MBS.
The mechanism of retaliation by Saudi Arabia are actually the silence of the others. You know, what do? They threaten, they withdraw some commercial deals, they expel the Canadian president, the Canadian ambassador, they make it difficult for Canadian companies to work in Saudi Arabia. And as I have been told repeatedly, any commercial deals of a significant amount in Saudi Arabia must pass through the Crown Prince or his affiliates. So that's what they do. But that will not work if the rest of the world was silent. The problem is that Saudi Arabia was alone. You know, whatever Saudi Arabia does is in keeping with the rules of the international world we live in. In my view, what is unacceptable is the fact that Canada's historical allies in the international system failed to go to the defense of Canada and failed to take a position on what Canada has denounced. Just remember, I'm always mentioning this because I thought this was the most shocking exhibition of international complicity. Remember Osaka 2019, June, a few days after I released my report, and we have, first of all, we have President Trump in some of his meetings, public speech, attacking press freedom in Osaka. And then we have that big photo. I think it was at the end. You have that photo with President Trump and Mohammed bin Salman in the middle of the photo. President Trump basically embracing Mohammed bin Salman in that photo, and everyone else waving with a big smile to the camera, with the exception, I will say, of Angela Merkel, who almost fell off the photo, maybe in shame. Okay? That is why Saudi Arabia is able to do what it is doing. You know, that's the only thing you have to remember. Saudi Arabia is able to continue the way it's acting because of what that photo symbolizes. The commitment of some head of state to embrace someone who may be a killer in the public face, in front of all the cameras of the world, and the willingness of everyone else to look at that exhibition of solidarity amongst rulers and not to say a word. I'm not suggesting that we need to anchor diplomatic relationship, economic relationship, political relationship with Saudi Arabia. I am at the minimum asking that when they are confronted, our elected representatives are confronted with that kind of behaviors, that they have the courage to A, walk out of the photo, and B, speak up. Speak up for what they believe in. Speak up for the values that have brought them to be elected, for some of them at least. You know, the silence of the international actors is what is allowing the continuing imprisonment of women's rights activists. I'm not talking about them speaking up in places where it's safe to speak up. I'm asking them to speak in places where it's not safe. In Osaka, 2019, they had that opportunity and they did not take it, and that's shameful. And we must remind them that's unacceptable.
So on the subject of MBS's popularity, Lina, let me start with you. He did seem to have an instinct when he came to prominence about the sense of pent-up deprivation that Saudi's very large young population had felt, the absence of normality, access to cinemas, access to music, concerts. And so that seemed to create this wave that he was counting on. Through your family, your networks in Saudi Arabia, and through your advocacy for your sister, have you detected a change in public mood over the last year or two? Or is it still a wave that he's riding successfully?
What I can say, at least, is that we see that people are not political anymore. Like everything that's political is a red line, so we can't really have a touch on what the people think. So I would say, I mean, what we see is that there's no critique at all in Saudi Arabia about MBS, but what they really think, we can never know, because there's no freedom at all to say what they think.
I think that's wise. It's very difficult to, especially we've seen on social media that not only can you not speak critically of the government, but you're almost required to cheerlead and clap your hands en masse.
Absolutely. I don't remember who it is. Maybe you do. It's not your father, but somebody was arrested for what he did not say.
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable. What kind of world is that? He was arrested because he did not comment at all. He did not comment positively about something that MBS was doing, and therefore he got arrested. He didn't even critique what MBS was saying.
So
Yes,
Hatice, sorry, go ahead. No, please.
And we also can see that since 2 years, we barely see real names on Twitter now. It's like there's a self-censorship that's really within the population, because they know that anyone can get arrested now. There's, the whole population is...
So Hatice, when in your conversations with Jamal in the months before his death, did he have a view about whether Saudi Arabia society was ripe for revolution, that there was something building up in the people that would explode, as we've seen in Sudan or Algeria? Or did he have a more cautious view about how public opinion might shape political change?
Onun görüşlerinin nasıl değiştiğini düşünüyordu Jamal.
Evet, biz birlikte hareket ettiğimiz zamanlarda mesela özellikle böyle restoranlarda, İstanbul'da birlikte zaman geçirirken böyle halka açık büyük parklara gittiğimiz zaman işte insanların özellikle ailelerin geldiği mekanlarda çok fazla dikkatli bir şekilde toplumu inceliyordu gittiğimiz yerlerde. Çünkü Türkiye'de bir aile kurmak için bulunması nedeniyle tabii daha da ilgisi artmış olabilir bu yönden. Normalde çok iyi bir gözlemci, Cemal'i tanıyanlar bilirler. Bana şey diyordu buradan yola çıkarak, mesela Suudi Arabistan toplumunun henüz bazı değişikliklere hazır olmadığını, Suudi Arabistan toplumunun çok uzun yıllar boyunca içe dönük bir toplum olarak yaşadığını, çok hızlı ve yukarıdan inme bir şekilde gelecek değişikliklere ve devrimlere açık olmadığını, Suudi Arabistanlı insanların aslında modern düşüncelere çok karşı olmadığını ama bunun geliş yöntemi itibariyle farklı olduğu için çok sert tepki verdiğini, çünkü insanların çok uzun yıllar boyunca biraz sert dini otorite tarafından bir yaşam biçimine hapsedildiğinden dolayı böyle bir tepki verdiğini, çünkü onu koruma içine giriyorlar dolayısıyla. Ve aslında herkesin içerisinde Suudi Arabistan'da modern, özgür, demokrasiye inanan bir yanın olduğunu bu tarz ifadeleriyle söylüyordu.
Whenever Jamal and I were walking in the parks in Istanbul, and when we were hanging out in cafes, restaurants, for example, I noticed that he was observing Turkish people and Turkish families, maybe because we were about to, be wedded. So and he was, Jamal was a very good observer. And what he was saying, Saudi society was not like Turkish society. So Saudi society was not ready yet for a change. And it's been a very introvert society, actually. And they had been exposed to, from top to, bottom, kind of, orders. And but for many years, the harsh religious authority confined Saudi people to a specific way of life. But despite that, there were many modern, families, thinkers, Saudi thinkers, and people were believing in democratic principles, according to Jamal.
Thank you. It's a very good note to end on, and nice to hear from Hatice as we conclude. I know that you have to get to the airport. We've reached the end of our time, unfortunately. For those of you who can stay and chat with others who might have questions they didn't get a chance to ask, we'd be grateful. But in the meantime, let me just ask the audience to join me and thank our panel.